give comment.
Okay, thank you. Moving down to item 4, approval of minutes. I am looking for a motion to approve the minutes of February 4th, 2026.
So moved.
Hi, Judy.
Hi.
Okay, I did have,
Hello.
I had a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Becky.
Thank you, Becky. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. And that motion passes. Going down to the consent agenda, items on the consent agenda are routine in nature and or have already been budgeted or discussed by the executive board, and today we have no items on the consent agenda. Going down to C, which is action items. Consideration and possible action regarding MetroPlan's Arizona Department of Transportation Planning to Programming, P2P, priority projects, and Kate Morley.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. The P2P process stands for Planning to Project, and that is an ADOT process by which they look at all the potential transportation projects on the state highway system and put them into their 5-year capital plan. At last year's advance, we had a long activity to identify the region's top priorities for the state's capital program so that we could be very clear to ADOT about what it is we wanted to see. ADOT is underfunded like the rest of transportation in the state with the gas tax not having been raised. And so being very clear to them about what our #1 priority is can help move that forward. So that was the focus of the advance. We identified 7 projects at that time with US 180 as our #1 project. And that US 180 project comes out of a corridor master plan that ADOT did, identifying spot improvements along the corridor. They looked at a bunch of alternatives, but the recommendation was spot improvements such as connecting missing sidewalks, crossings across 180. There's about a 3-mile gap there where there aren't any signalized crossings. Better bike lanes, those kinds of solutions along the corridor, really with a safety focus. So board members, thank you all for speaking at state transportation board meetings over the last 6 months to really emphasize that. And then just because of the state of funding with ADOT, we need to recognize that it can take years to get something into their 5-year capital plan. So last year at the advance on the screen, you see are the 7 projects we identified as priorities with that 180 project at the note as the top. This has been a lot for us to message and really too many things. We're going to really advocate for one at a time. And so we looked at this list and thought, how else might we be able to move some of these projects forward? And could we consolidate our list to make it more clear for ADOT? So we have a couple recommendations about changes made to this. And so keep US 180 as our #1 priority. For #2, change what we had as an enhanced crossing at the intersection of Milton and Route 66 and broaden it to say intersection improvements, because there are other components of that project that we would like to see that aren't just the enhanced crossing. We then recommend removing a couple projects, as you'll see. Route 66 and Ponderosa Parkway, Milton separated grade crossings, and Route 66 corridor improvements. And the reason for those are, the first one is really a pretty small ask, and so not where we maybe want to spend our legislative effort lobbying for a single component like that. And ADOT is doing a Route 66 pavement preservation project where we might be able to get a better crosswalk installed after that pavement preservation project. The second one, the Milton grade separated crossings, are more of a technical conversation that we need to have with ADOT beforehand and whose responsibility those are. I think we all agree that Milton could benefit from grade separated crossings, but are they the state's responsibility? Are they the city's responsibility? Those kinds of questions could really hold up a project like this from moving forward. In this moment, we can work on it long term. The Route 66 corridor improvements are between Milton and Eldon. Eldon's at the east end of downtown. Those can also be part of that pavement preservation project or incorporated into the improvements the city is making through the downtown mile. And then, but then we want to keep actually the last two, even though there's a red X. I'll explain that on the last one. The West 66 corridor improvements are still a priority for us. We did that operational assessment last year, and we've been trying to move this project forward through the a state appropriation, where Senator Rogers has introduced a bill for us for $3 million. And we have a $18 million ask as part of the larger RTAC bill. And then Project 7 there, the Burris traffic signal is actually funded, and in the plan, it was awarded a HSIP grant. And so we're taking it off of our list because it's moving forward. So it's actually a good thing. So really just trying to narrow this list down a little bit. So a little bit more, I talked to you about the 180 project. There's a bunch of schools, bus stops that don't have crossings, missing sidewalks associated with those schools. So that's what that project looks like. The Milton and 66 project that we're recommending remains. You can see some of those items here. There's some improved curb radii, which would slow traffic down coming or whipping around that corner to the right. The enhanced crossings, the pedestrian refuge. So some more things to make that one more than just an enhanced crossing project. And then the third one that we talked about is the West Route 66 corridor safety improvements and trying to move this forward. This is a very expensive project. It's a whole corridor. So we're trying to get pieces of it done to keep it moving forward. So that was our recommendation to the TAC, was to narrow it to those three projects. But we also asked the question, should we add anything else? So if we take these other projects off, is there something else that has arisen since last February that should be a priority? And we had a couple ideas about what that might be, including some safety things that have risen to the top along Milton. The Belmont interchange, which is a very expensive project, that is one of those things we need to find multiple funding sources to come together to make that happen. And then two other interchanges that are very conceptual at this point, but have been talked about for many years and would also be very expensive. I-40 interchanges at Lone Tree and Woody Mountain. The TAC said, let's wait on that. So we're doing this project prioritization process with Kittleson and Associates, where they're mapping all of the projects in the region and going to filter them through. And the TAC said, none of this is urgent because we're still working on 180. So let's see what comes out of that prioritization process before we add more things to the list. So with that, our recommendation is to modify the list to just have those three projects on it. And I'm sorry that says questions or comments from the TAC. It should say from the board. And happy to take those.
Thank you. Board, are there any questions or comments? Go ahead, Tim.
Chair. Kate, I like this approach. I think it probably helps create a sound political argument, if you will, for where we should be investing resources. The time and effort that went into putting together the original plan, the list of those 7, just curious, if those aren't necessarily dropping off, we're going to keep them on our radar, that we're just being more calculating in our approach to what we're trying to emphasize first and foremost, but keeping those still a part of our long-term plan moving forward. Is that correct?
Correct. We still want to see all those projects happen. We're going to try some other approaches to get them done, like through that pavement preservation project, and see if we can incorporate them. So we do still want to see them. They are not things that we're giving up on.
Thank you.
This is Becky. I'll just echo that I think that this is a good direction, and we'll just clarify for people what our top priorities are.
Thank you for that comment. And Kate, I had a question. So we do our strategic planning every year. Will this come back during that process? And if, who knows what might change and
Yeah, so every year we'll revisit our prioritization processes, which are largely right now this focus, the P2P process, as well as the strategic grants plan. We are building that tool in partnership with Kittleson and Associates to map all the projects and have them filtered by our transportation values. That will give us a baseline. It's not the end of the conversation of whatever that tool spits out our priorities, but it will narrow the 400 plus projects in the region to maybe a list of 10 or 15 projects that we could all then talk about and decide what our priorities are. So with the P2P list, I do recommend, because it can take years to see a project come to fruition, that we really stick with one until we get it, funded, or at least, and getting it in the 5-year capital plan is step one. You have to maintain it till the year of construction so that it doesn't fall back out. That's where it can really be this long-term thing. And we don't want to change course too often in this particular program. The strategic grants plan, we may change more often because we're also being reactive to administration priorities. And so need to update that more often, but we'll talk about that next on the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you for clarity.
Question. I have a question.
Go ahead, Director Begay.
Yes. Somewhere I'm not sure if it's this listing we're talking about, but we talked about the turnoff to the Sacred Peaks, where it's kind of scary to have people and the traffic doesn't stop. Everything's just going, and people from the Sacred Peaks area, and that live in that area, that's a concern to them. So I don't know if this is part of the list that we've been talking about, but I know we had several lists in various parts of the government, and I'm just thinking, is this part of it?
Yeah, so the jurisdictional ownership of 89 gets a little spotty, shall I say, on the east side of town. Some of it's ADOT, some of it's City of Flagstaff, and the ownership of 89 at the Sacred Peaks Medical Facility is actually under the City of Flagstaff. So it's not something we would advocate for through this ADOT capital construction process. I do know Mountain Line is trying to readjust their bus stop to be closer to that facility as a step towards making that better. And I know the city has looked at crossings there. I don't know the status of that, but we could follow up with the city and see where they're at.
Yeah, I think it would be great because I think as transportation providers, and we're talking about roads and stuff like that, I think we need to probably support everyone that's in the realm so that we can do support letters or whatever, on their behalf. So I know that we're dealing with the county roads, cities, and other roads. So I just wanted to say and here we have meetings together. And so I'm still kind of pushing for that. So if you can give me a call, or maybe we can meet sometime next week on that and do some homework, I would greatly appreciate that. Maybe you're saying that you might kind of check on it or something. That would be great too. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I am not seeing any. So there is a recommendation, and I'm looking for a motion to recommend the approval of the P2P priority projects.
So move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That recommendation carries.
Thank you. And just for the record, I think the motion was by Member Begay, and the second by Member Williams.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, moving down to consideration and possible action regarding strategic grants plan update. And Kate, take it away.
Thank you. So this is that other big prioritization process that we have. And we do have a major overhaul of the strategic grants plan this time. And that is because it's the first time we've updated it since the new federal administration came into place. And one of our goals for this is we have all sorts of project needs within the region, and we want to be most strategic about what's likely to be funded in our grant planning process while still focusing on priorities to the region. So we did do a major overhaul of this, and you'll see that as I work through the different grant programs that we have. So a little bit about the strategic grants plan as a reminder, this helps our partners win grants in a couple ways. One, we're able to prepare further in advance. So often the federal government will just open up a notice of funding and you've got 45 days to respond, but that takes a lot of effort. And so we can look ahead and start preparing applications in advance rather than waiting for it to open and then scrambling to decide what we're going to do. It also reduces competition between our member agencies. So we need congressional support to win these grants. And if we all go compete, then our congressional representatives tend to stay out of it because they don't want to pick favorites. And so if we can be coordinated, then that allows our congressional reps to get behind us in a stronger fashion. It also, it's flexible, right? So we're doing our best to look ahead at a multi-year grants plan. However, things change. And so we don't stop our member agencies from pursuing other grants, but the little bit of teeth that we give this plan is that if you're applying for something in the strategic grants plan, we'll give you a letter of support, no problem. If you're applying for something that's not in the strategic grants plan, we're going to bring that back to the board to see if they support it, making sure that we're not competing against someone else that was going to submit an application. So a caveat for this particular update, the surface transportation bill is going to be reauthorized anytime. So September 30th is when the current bill expires, and that's what outlines all these grant programs. That hopefully will get renewed in the next year or two. September 30th is the deadline. It typically is not does not happen on the deadline, but there is an incentive for Republicans to get this done because they can control the bill at the moment. So we're gonna focus on years 1 and 2 as we look at this. We do a 3-year this year and a 3-year look ahead, but those out years right now are really speculative because I can't say that these grant programs are even going to exist at that point. So focus on the first couple of years. Okay, so we're going to walk through all of them. The slides are a little bit busy because I wanted to show you what was in the plan before and what is in the plan now. But if you don't care that much about the history, again, just focus on years 1 and 2 of the chart on the right-hand side. So this first program is the Transportation Alternatives Program, and it funds active transportation infrastructure, beautification efforts, some historic preservation kind of things. And we did switch projects around here. We are under design in collaboration with the Forest Service for the Mount Eldon Base Trail. So we want to move that project forward as soon as ADOT will let us move that forward, as well as the city was awarded design money for some of the components on US 180 that we talked about under the previous item. So we'd love to see that move forward as well. We're working with ADOT right now to figure if they'll actually let us do that. This grant just opened up. So we're not positive that those projects are far enough along that they're going to let us apply for construction. So we are looking at a couple of the other items that you see in year 2 right now. The county is looking at applying for Cromer. They had a right-of-way issue that they have resolved, so they are able to make that application. And then we're having some discussions with the city about applying for a downtown mobility study to look at revamping infrastructure in the downtown area for better ADA access and bike ped access there. The Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP, we have a couple projects. This isn't open every year, so we're looking ahead at 2027 for potential projects. The county has one on and Lake Mary roads for rumble strips, and then the city has one for what we're calling East Flag Safety Improvements, which are a bunch of spot improvements to just help with the high crash rates on that side of town. Safe Streets and Roads for All. This has been a very popular grant across the country. We're looking at potentially leveraging some money in the city's CIP for neighborhood traffic calming as a potential way to get more of that done. Those are often in response to neighborhood complaints. In this year and then in the next year, the county is looking at a Safe Routes to School bus program. Or sorry, school and bus stops program. The Active Transportation Infrastructure Improvement Program, frankly, hasn't opened up in the last year, and I'm not sure we're going to see it open again under this administration. But if we do, we'd really be looking ahead to a 27 application to pursue active transportation along Milton and Railroad Springs. Those are some planned alternative paths to Milton, and then a foots trail along the railroad tracks out towards Railroad Springs. Like I said, I'm not sure that we're going to see this program open again, but it only funds active transportation infrastructure, so is a place where we can plug those kinds of improvements in. Protect is a program to create resiliency on roads and highways related to climate change. It's another program we haven't seen open up this year. The city has an application prepared. It was actually open during the change of administration last year. And then they pulled the NOFO and they have not reopened that, but the city is prepared to make an application should that reopen. And then we could look at further out activities such as doing general resilience planning for the region or other drainage improvements in the north of downtown area. Now, BUILD is a very popular program. This was formerly the RAISE program, and it has had active application cycles, so it's still moving projects through it. Our top project here is construction of John Wesley Powell Boulevard connection between Lake Mary Road and I-17. And that's partly because an application for the Arizona Smart Fund was made that requires us to go after a federal grant. And so we want to support that so we don't have to give those Arizona Smart Fund dollars back. They have not been awarded yet, but hopefully will be later this month. Looking further out, we'd like to keep moving some of the Safe Routes to School work we're doing over in the greater Sunnyside neighborhood area forward. And this could be a program that could help us do that. The Federal Lands Access Program is helping increase access to federal lands, much like the title says. It's been around for a very long time and it opens up every couple of years. The county is very aggressive about going after these funds on a regular basis. And they are looking again at doing some work on Lake Mary Road, a little bit further out of the region, but out towards the Mormon Lake area. And another project that's long been on the radar for this particular grant program is potentially repaving Snowball Road, which if you've been up there lately, that is in very poor condition. So looking at those opportunities, that benefits Mountain Line as well. They're driving the buses on that roadway. I think everyone would like a smoother ride. Infra-Mega Rural, this is another very popular program. This is where people apply for the big chunks of money nationally. So if you're looking at interstate projects, this is actually how the Downtown Mile project is funded. So a major grant program. The county is really pursuing that Belmont interchange. And so this is the program that has those large funding dollars that could help get that program or that project across the finish line. It would still be really hard to get a $55 million award out of this program, but it is one of the larger programs out there. Further down the road, if we wanted other interchanges like Lone Tree realignment or Lone Tree interchange, this could be a program that funds something like that. Looking at a couple of the transit programs, we had a bunch of tables. We've really tried to simplify them. They had Mountain Lions very detailed in their capital planning, so we had all that laid out. We've really just consolidated them. They're very much looking at bus storage and buses in the coming years. They've got a lot of their major capital projects already funded. 5305E transit planning is one we partner with Mountain Line on, and we don't have particular things identified at this moment, but we just wanted to acknowledge that we typically do apply for that every year in the realm of $200,000 to $250,000. This is the program that is funding their operational assessment. Rural and Tribal Assistance Program is a program that just helps rural communities, which we qualify for under DOT requirements, move projects forward. So it's not going to fund construction, but it will help you with design. It will help you figure out right-of-way acquisition. It will help you figure out your funding mechanisms to get something like that Belmont interchange done. The county did apply for that. I think we're still waiting to hear on their award. 2.5 million is the max ask. They wanted to get design as far as they could to help set them up for future grant opportunities. And again, it's another place where we could look at trying to figure out how to move other I-40 interchanges forward. So we're not going to get them done, but we might look at financing mechanisms, those kinds of things through this program. Arizona Smart Fund, one of our favorite programs here because it helps us leverage all the grant programs that we just talked about. This really ties back to the things that we already talked about and leveraging money to match those grant programs or prep for those grant programs. So I won't go through it, but it supports everything we just talked about. And then we also have the Rural Transportation Advocacy Bill, or the RTAC bill. And this is a way to get state appropriations. You know, typically the region gets about $22 million a year to ask for appropriations under this bill, but the amount likely to be awarded is more like $3 to $4 million. And so we're trying to be strategic about what we apply for here. West Route 66 design and US 180 are already in that bill. Again, this is the kind of thing that might take several years to move forward, though our $3 million request through Senator Rogers is moving forward. And so we'll see what happens in that budget process. And then I think this is our last one here. This is congressionally directed spending. So these requests are open now where we can submit to our representatives, our federal representatives, projects that we would like to see included in the next budget cycle. And again, we're trying to find all the ways to move that Belmont interchange project forward, and then looking forward, continuing to bring money into West Route 66 or the priorities there, along with potentially Mountain Lions Phase 2 of the DCC. I think timing on that is still pending a little bit, but want to make sure we recognize that also. So I know that was a lot and very fast. But we did go over this with the TAC as well, and the TAC was supportive of the changes made to the program, recognizing that we're probably going to have another major overhaul of this in the next year or two as the federal surface transportation bill changes as well. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Board, are there any questions or comments? I find this very helpful. It is just having it in one spot to see everything and how we're moving. Thank you for putting that together.
I have questions, but I won't take time up here because I don't know like how these are submitted and all that stuff. So
I can give a basic overview. I mean, most of these grants are direct from DOT. A handful of them are passed through to ADOT. So when they're passed through to ADOT, ADOT typically gets a formula allocation that then they redistribute to people. And those applications come in a variety of formats, frankly. Every ADOT program runs differently. So that would be the HSIP program or the TA program in particular for the things that we saw up here today. The direct to DOT programs typically have a very formal process that's really structured. They are submitted through grants.gov typically, although there's one that has a different platform. Many of them require a benefit cost analysis, so a more technical analysis that goes with it, and they typically have more like 20-page applications. So more work, but also more transparency in the process. It's very clear what you're getting into and what the rules associated with it will be if you are awarded ADOT, because this isn't what they typically do. They started, a new program, the TA under the IIJA. They're still refining that program and making it better. Their HSIP program's been around a very long time. They've got a pretty regular process in place for that one. So, but most of them are submitted through grants.gov. And you have to comply with all the federal requirements associated with that. Very high level.
Any other questions? Okay, I would like to entertain a recommendation that we adopt the strategic grants plan 2026 through 2029 update. Can I get a motion?
So
This is
moved.
Becky. This is Becky, second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries. Thank you, Kate. Moving down to consideration and possible action regarding adoption of the 2026 MetroPlan Mountain Line Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Sweet and board members. I'm Kim Austin, and I'm the Transportation Demand Management Planner, and I will be presenting this topic. The Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan is a plan that identifies strategies for improved cost-effective service coordination in the MetroPlan region, focusing on transportation needs for older adults, individuals with disabilities, and people with low incomes. It's a required document by Council of Governments and Metropolitan Planning Organizations. This year, we made some minor updates to the plan, mainly demographics, obviously an address change, and one strategy, which I'm going to show you in the next slide, vehicle inventories and some eligible projects, and it requires board adoption. Let's see. Okay, so this is the one strategy. This strategy was identified by the Coordinated Mobility Council, and it was adopted on February 20th. And basically, it's relaying messages through the proper channels and allowing stakeholders to interact and communicate effectively. So better communication, better interaction and engagement between the stakeholders and projects to make sure that everyone is taking everyone into consideration, mainly people with mobility challenges or just everyone into consideration. So that is why this strategy was added to the plan. I will say, hang on, there is one minor change that you were given a draft in your board packet. There's a date that we needed to adjust on page 53, appendices 3 and 4. The dates were needed to be changed from 26 and 27 to 27 and 28. And I just need to make a note because when you, if you recommend adoption, that needs to be included in the adoption. Okay, so with that, I will take some questions, but this is an action item that needs to be adopted by the board if you so choose to do so.
Thank you. Or do we have any questions or comments? We am not seeing any. So I will take a motion for the recommendations.
This is Becky, so moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That recommendation carries.
Thank you so much.
Suite, members of the board, Tammy Suho Viejo, Business Manager. I'm here to talk to you about an item that we're bringing to you for your approval and consideration. MetroPlan would like to join the Arizona State Cooperative Purchasing Program. Membership in this program would allow MetroPlan to access already competitively bid contracts that would save us money, actually. The state has buying power over $9 billion. And so they are able to come together and collectively do these competitive bids and requests for proposal for different products and services that governmental agencies, nonprofits, schools, lots of different agencies qualify for membership in this program. What a membership in this program will do is benefit MetroPlan by shortening the time for our solicitation processes. Because we'd be able to access competitively bid contracts, we may be able to review a contract, see that they offer the service at a price that works with our budget, and we would be able to forego the steps of sending out a solicitation, receiving proposals, scoring proposals, evaluating proposals, all of that we could bypass that and save time. The co-op suppliers are already vetted. And so these vendors that are available to us, as I said, have been through this competitive bid process with the state. And it would allow us to move more quickly through some of our solicitations. The program offers an on-call list of different vendors that we currently work with. And so there's an advantage there as well. It does require a membership agreement, which is why we're bringing this item to the board. So we're asking you to approve our membership and allow Executive Director Morley to sign the membership agreement. Do you have any questions?
I have a question. Have we been part of this co-op before?
We have not. MetroPlan has not been a member of the co-op before. There are other MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, and COGS, Council of Governments, in Arizona that are members.
I mean, this seems like a great tool for us, and I'm glad you're bringing it forward. And I'm glad that you have this option to join.
Yeah, it's a great option. I will add a comment. It doesn't change any of our procurement procedures that you have approved as our board. We will still follow our procurement procedures with, bringing items to you that are $50,000 or more. What this does do is it helps us through that solicitation process where we might be able to shorten that in some circumstances.
Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any, so I will entertain a recommendation to approve the cooperative purchasing program.
Sorry, question. Does the agreement specify on relying on these the costs associated or the pricing associated with this co-op?
It does not, we are not exclusively required to use these contracts as a member. We still have the option to do our own solicitations. That could be for a few different reasons. That maybe the service that's offered isn't specific enough in that contract. And so we might do our own solicitation to make sure that the vendor we're choosing can meet the requirements in our scope of work. There's not an exclusivity agreement. Welcome.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Can I get someone to move for the recommendation?
I move to approve as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Becky. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That recommendation carries. Thank you, Annie. We're down to discussion items. Update on Northern Arizona University membership. Kate.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. So a little bit of background. We sent a letter, the board voted to send a letter to NAU in January requesting follow-up on their desire to join the MetroPlan board. The board was interested in having NAU join because, as you can see on the map in front of you, they are a major landholder in town with quite a few roads, bike ped connectivity, and a transit system. So very important to our transportation system and something that we want to make sure is integrated into everything else that is going on. In February, we did hear back from NAU that they would like to join the board. And Jeff McKay has joined us here today. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. We do have steps to have NAU formally join. So he's not voting today, but he is starting to learn MetroPlan and participate alongside us. They've also indicated that they'd like Josh Mayer to continue in the role on the management committee and would also have a seat on the TAC, which is still to be determined. So there are some steps, as I mentioned, that we need to go to formalize this. First, there's a master IGA that establishes MetroPlan that is between the city and the county. So we've redlined that for our partners and sent it over to them and are hoping that the council and the board of supervisors will consider that amendment by May. That allows us to then amend our MetroPlan bylaws and our MetroPlan operating procedures at our June board meeting so that everything is aligned to have NAU as a voting member on the board. And with that, that would also include that NAU is paying the $5,000 per board seat membership due. And really with that, I just wanted to provide that update. It's very exciting. I know this has been a long time conversation, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
Any questions or comments, board?
Sure. Kate, just thank you for continuing to stay on this particular topic. It's great to have NAU at the table. Looking forward to us getting forward in the process of formalizing that contribution, because there have been moments in my time where having that voice at the table, I think, would have been really super important. So I'm really glad to see NAU being able to be here.
And I echo that. Jeff, welcome. We are very happy to have you and appreciate that NAU is interested in being part of MetroPlan. I think it's very important for discussions, and thank you for being with us.
It is amazing how many conversations I had to have with leadership to be here today. So, yeah, the buy-in is there, so.
Well, we appreciate all the heavy lifting you did to get here. So. Any other questions or comments? Moving down to Rural Transportation Advocacy Council update. Kate.
All right, you're not going to get rid of me for a couple more items. So, Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, we commonly refer to as RTAC. So this is an update. We've had some major changes over there, but I wanted to start with what is RTAC. RTAC serves rural Arizona communities by forming a coalition that is advocating for the rural needs. And it really came about in response to MAG and PAG, so the greater Phoenix area and the greater Tucson area, having a lot of power and weight over transportation funding and population. If you look at population formulas, they should be getting a lot of it. But rural Arizona really relies on the contributions from those population areas to be able to get something like a bridge project done or a roadway built because they don't have the population base themselves. So RTAC comes together to advocate to ensure that rural Arizona is getting its fair share of the gas tax, and that ADOT is spending their fair share of money in rural Arizona, et cetera. Member Vasquez serves on the board of directors, and Chair Sweet is our alternate on that board. And it's been in place for 25 years, and it's been hosted out of NACOG during that time. So NACOG is the Northern Arizona Council of Governments. And it started as a very small organization. So just out of ease was made essentially a department of NACOG that has grown a lot in that time period. There are 4 main goals right now for RTAC. RTAC's goals are protecting and establishing that fair share of transportation funding, advocating for legislation that serves the interest of rural Arizona, such as the Arizona Smart Fund. That's only available to rural Arizona. Phoenix cannot apply for that money. Tucson cannot apply for that money. They're also advocating for just generally increasing transportation funding at the state level that would benefit everybody. And then drafting and advocating for legislation that serves rural Arizona at the national level. So making sure that that surface transportation reauthorization bill doesn't just benefit large cities and DOTs, that money will flow through to local jurisdictions and smaller populations. So the big transition is that Kevin Adam has been the RTAC liaison, the single employee of RTAC for 19 years, and he is transitioning. It's a great thing for Arizona. He's actually going to become a lobbyist for one of the national coalitions. So we'll really have him out there rooting for Arizona as the surface transportation bill moves forward. But it does leave RTAC, which has relied on that single position for 19 years, in a state of transition. And so the board made a couple really big decisions at their last meeting that I wanted to share. First, they've hired Dorn Policy Group, a contract lobbyist group, to finish out the state session. So we have the RTAC bill moving forward. We have the Arizona Smart Fund recapitalization moving forward. So that contract lobbyist will help us get through the rest of this session and hopefully see those things across the finish line. They also increased dues by 2 cents per capita to balance the budget. So we've been running a deficit for a couple of years. And in order to recruit a new executive director, we felt it was really critical that we could say to an executive director that we were invested in this organization and going to make sure it was fiscally sound. So they did make that change so that the budget could be balanced and they wouldn't draw from their surplus money anymore. That has an impact to the city and the county who pay those dues on behalf of the region. They also adopted a 1 to 3 year strategic plan. We'd been working on a strategic plan, but again, we felt like that was really helpful in the recruitment process for us to finalize that so that we knew what skill sets and who we were looking for in a director. And then finally forming a transition committee. And the reason we didn't just open up a new job, revamp a job description and open it up, is this is the moment where we can take the opportunity to consider that structure with NACOG and separate from NACOG. So it's been something that's been on the radar for a long time as this organization has grown, but because we had an employee in it, that employee was in the ASRS system, there were a lot of complicated factors to trying to separate. Now that we don't have an employee associated with this organization, we can really revamp that structure without impacting somebody's benefits or retirement system. So we're taking the time to look at that organizational structure as we do this. We're looking at full independence, so just becoming an independent organization that contracts out for payroll services or legal services as needed. So still really a 1 person, maybe a 2 person organization. We're looking at the potential of contracting, much like MetroPlan does, contract payroll to Mountain Line. We're looking at that opportunity with the League of Cities and Towns or with the County Supervisors Associations or with a different COG or MPO, which is a different structure than what's existing at NACOG, where this person is really just an employee of NACOG and functions as a department of NACOG. So it'd still be an independent organization choosing to run payroll in a particular method. So that'll all be coming to the board. We'll have drafts of that for the board this month, and then hoping that the board will take action on that next month so that we can really start that recruitment process. And I just wanted to provide that update. RTAC's really important to the region and wanted to make sure that people were aware of what was happening there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for all of your work with RTAC. You do a tremendous amount, and I didn't realize that until fairly recently how involved you are, so thank you. Director Williams.
Madam Chair, thank you. Kate, I do have a question. And this is just really my ignorance. I mean, you know, I've served on the board for several years now. It's never occurred to me to ask this question, but how large is RTAC? Like, I know that there were a few names you had up on the screen earlier about representation that we would be familiar with here, but I'm assuming when you talk about rural Arizona, we're not isolating it to just northern Arizona. It's all of rural Arizona. So I'm just trying to grasp like the size of that board and representation at that table.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the board membership is that there is an elected official from every one of the rural COGs or MPOs. So that's how we limit it from being too enormous. There are 11 rural COGs and MPOs-ish. 11-ish rural COGs and MPOs. So it's not overwhelming. Most of those COGs and MPOs have a main member and then also an alternate as well. So they're representing a really large geographic area, but by using that structure, the board is not enormous.
Thank you.
And I see that Director Vasquez has his hand up, and I do want to thank him as well for being our person on the board. And Geronimo does a lot, goes down to Phoenix, does a lot of communicating and lobbying, and just works very hard for his role on RTAC as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to state that it's an exciting time for RTAC. We were in some conversations about what the new role was for RTAC just last year. And so then with Kevin leaving, it kind of forced us to reimagine what RTAC could be and what that would look like. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Kate for all her hard work and help leading, you know, our efforts. And she took on some of the research on where RTAC could possibly be housed. And so it has been a lot of work and she's put in a lot of time in it. And I just wanted to recognize that because it is important work and she's definitely in the lead in of the different MPO directors that are helping this transition happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from the board? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Kate. We are down to our legislative update.
Thank you. All right, lots of legislative stuff today. Fun. It's all about funding. Okay, so our legislative agenda has two sections, state and federal. I'll start with the state items. The first one is really about that long-term revenue for transportation at the state level. We're one of just a couple states that hasn't increased their gas tax in a very long time, and it is not indexed for inflation. So a couple things we're working on related to this, what we call the a la carte revenue menu. And it's basically what are all the different ways we could fund transportation in the state. There is not a lot of appetite for raising the gas tax. There may be more appetite for things like sales tax, vehicle registration fees, those kinds of solutions. So putting that together so that we have data behind how much these different potential revenue sources could generate for the state of Arizona. This is a place where RTAC becomes really important because once we have a revenue source, we need to make sure rural Arizona gets its fair share, and partly why that coalition is so important. But we also need to build a bigger coalition because we're not going to pass anything at the state level unless greater Mag and Pag, that greater Phoenix, greater Tucson are also getting something out of it. We need those voters to be able to pass some sort of revenue mechanism. So working with them as well. And then we're also working on using the Arizona Transportation Policy Summit, which we're the hosts of this October. That's a rotating 2-day conference around the state where we do get a bunch of members of the legislature to attend. We're trying to use that as a platform to really talk about those revenue options and come up with solutions. So this is the long-term a strategy. This is not something we're going to solve in a year, but we're really trying to keep momentum going. There is a lot of conversation, maybe more conversation than I have seen in a long time at the state about doing something for revenue for transportation. The second item is to really advocate for the SMART Fund. So our goal was to advocate that the SMART Fund was recapitalized at $35 million, which is about how much money has been being used every year. Representative Wen has introduced a bill for $15 million for the recapitalization of the SMART Fund. And then the governor has $10 million in her budget for the SMART Fund. So we're happy to take anything we can get. It's been a really important fund for us. If you look at that chart, the little tiny gray bar there is the $14 million of Arizona Smart Fund that we have used to leverage the green, the federal grants, and then the big blue column on the right, the total value of the project. So $14 million in Arizona Smart Funds has leveraged $252 million in projects in the region. So just hugely beneficial to us. If the applications that are currently in ADOT's hand are awarded, there will only be $5 million left in the whole fund. So it's really time we need that fund to be reinvested in at the state level. So it's been a big priority. It is a hugely popular program. You never run into anyone who's skeptical about it. They see the return on investment and they like it. It will just come down to the budget in the end and whether or not there's any money for opportunities like this. Also at the state level, those two key priority projects, US 180 and West Route 66, we have different approaches on. US 180, we're really trying to get into that ADOT capital plan. It is a smaller value project. So again, with ADOT's limited funding, trying to get that across the finish line. And thank you to those of you who have been brave enough to say, do a 180 on US 180 to the State Transportation Board. Credit to Keith Breckus at the county for our slogan, but it makes them laugh and that's all that matters. So they remember our project. It is not in the draft plan that came out on Friday. I was saving that for you earlier. So as I said, this can take multiple years to get a project into it. The draft plan is open for public comment. I'll bring a letter back to the board for consideration next time to submit to the State Transportation Board on that item. But we're going to keep working to try to get those 180 safety improvements into the capital plan. On West Route 66, we're hoping for the appropriation. We're going for a state appropriation on that one. The RTAC bill has $18 million in it. The RTAC's bill purpose is to really talk about transportation need. It's the RTAC we just talked about in the previous agenda item. They introduce a bill every year on behalf of rural Arizona. The point is to say, look at all this need. These are only the priority projects in all these regions. And it's a $480 million bill. It will never cross the finish line as a bill. And it again gets torn apart into little budget packages at the end, and maybe your project gets funded or not. So because that's the reality of the bill, we had Senator Rogers introduce a $3 million bill in that price range that's more likely to be funded. And that is also moving forward with a lot of momentum. But again, it'll just come down to if there's any money in the budget and if Senator Rogers gets to prioritize that with any discretion that she gets in that budget process. The next one there is educate on the need for funding ADOT really to the legislature. And this one is that the legislature actually has a lot of control over ADOT's ability to staff itself and the wages of ADOT staff. And so we are seeing the impacts of that because ADOT is losing staff. They're unable to recruit staff because they can't compete. And so that has a direct impact on their ability to deliver projects, which in the end makes projects cost more because they take longer and it's hard to get things out the door. So we don't have a particular ask with the state on that. We're just trying to remind them that these have financial implications and that we really would love to see them invest in their Department of Transportation staff. Okay, that's this. Maybe I'll pause and see if there's any questions on the state before I jump into the federal.
Any questions? I'm not seeing any.
Okay. At the federal level, we also have a surface transportation reauthorization priorities list, and we have main priorities and then secondary priorities. They largely align with what our tax priorities are. We worked with our member agencies on them, so we're all aligned locally on what our priorities are. And the main pieces here that the funding levels stay high. So the last surface transportation bill really increased funding levels. We want to see that remain. And that we want to see those discretionary, ideally would like to see those discretionary grant programs remain, because that's how we get those big dollar value items as rural places when things are population based. Again, we can't get that bridge built, we can't get that road built because we don't have the formula for population doesn't give us enough money. We also wanted to see the equitable distribution of funding, and this is related to Arizona's been a really high growth state, and DOT has not updated the formulas by which they distribute the money to the states, and so we're losing out because those population formulas are old. And then finally, the other main priority there is related to Mountain Line, and it's the STIC program, where that's money set aside for high performing transit systems. And we'd love to see that increase because that would bring more operating revenue to Mountain Line. So, and that's popular because it's a performance-based program. So those were our priorities, but things are really starting to move along with the surface transportation reauthorization. And they're not all aligned with our priorities. So Chairman Graves will have a huge impact on where reauthorization heads. And as you can see, he says we're going back to the basics, and that really means looking at roads and bridge projects as we historically did, and also less discretionary programs. So we wanted those discretionary programs so we could have the big pots of money to go after, but they really want to do more formula money and likely formula money to the state. And then the way that plays out could be really impactful for us. So, okay, so here's a little bit about how that might play out for us. So under the IIJA, which are the pie charts on this slide, you can see that 24% of the money was discretionary and that local and regions were able to apply for the vast majority of that discretionary money. So, and then the rest of it was formula, mostly to the states. So some of those pass through to local areas as well, but largely to the states. And you can see that the IIJA hugely increased the discretionary funding in the green chart, in the green bar chart on the right. So IIJA was wonderful for local communities in terms of their ability to access funding. If they move all this new money, there's a bunch of new money, they're talking about moving it all back to formula to the states, or 90% of it back to formula to the states, which would mean locals have far less access to the money that they currently have access to. It's great for state DOTs, and we have plenty of needs on the Arizona highway system that we will be able to spend that money, no problem. It's just going to be on different kinds of things if local communities can't get their hands on that money or can't get their hands on large pots of money. So that's where things really are headed. And now I'm starting to shift from my hope for discretionary programs to remain to how do we strategically take advantage of a system which gives all the money to the DOT, and in what ways could we make that most advantageous to the region? There could be requirements about the DOT passing some of that money through, or potentially making competitive grants available at the state level like they do with that transportation alternatives program. So just thinking through those opportunities and how we can best take advantage, being that this is really where it appears that things are headed with the surface transportation reauthorization. Our other federal item is to just keep supporting those grants, right? So we have been, of course, writing those support letters for the projects that have been applying for discretionary grant programs. So that's just a little bit of an update there. But the big piece of surface transportation is really starting to take shape. People are really starting to take positions. Obviously, DOTs really like where this is headed. And we have, like I said, Milton Road is owned by the DOT, 180 is owned by the DOT, large parts of 66 are owned by the DOT. We've got I-40, we've got I-17. There's still lots of needs in the region. It just could look very different in terms of what we pursue. So I'm happy to take questions on that.
Thank you. It's a good update. Any questions, board? Kate, I'm wondering, are you talking, I mean, I'm assuming we are talking to other organizations, municipalities, like how are we to strategize? You mentioned strategizing.
Yep, we're members of a couple organizations that are all part of an even larger organization called the LOC Coalition, which is the local officials in transportation. And so as our membership with AMPO and our membership with NARC, we comment, Dave actively participates in their policy committee. We comment, we try to help shape their policy, and then they're collaborating with these other organizations. And it's really this LOC Coalition, which includes the National League of Cities and the county, the National County, I can't think of what it is right now.
Yeah.
NACO. I know it's NACO. I can't think of what that stands for. National Association of County Organizations.
No, just National Association of Counties.
Thank you. Um, and so we're all working together, and really it's those entities and AASHTO, which is the National Association of the DOTs. So it's those entities largely weighing in. There is also private sector interests, right? But from the public sector, those are the
Okay,
big ones. Yeah.
thank you for clarifying. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Safe Streets Master Plan update. Mr. Wessel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Wessel, Transportation Planning Manager. Just to give a quick update, I'm going to give a little background since we have our new member to be here. Safe Streets Master Plan, SSMP, is a large transportation master planning grant that we received through the Safe Streets and Roads for All. It's together with city match. It's $2.5 million planning grant to produce this master plan, which is a sizable sum. There's several components to this master plan beyond just kind of the usual, where do we want our streets and paths and transit routes to go? Another big component of that is what we're calling our complete streets guidelines. And then in simple terms, it's the cross section, what the streets should look like, but really going to the next step of saying, and where should those occur across the region? And then the step beyond that will be to actually introduce codes, standards revisions, and other things to regulatory documents. And then a lot of project management to go with that. Which brings me to my first slide. We have a project management team because the city it's our contract through MetroPlan. City's putting up the bulk of the match, or all of the match really, with the exception of small contributions from Mountain Line and the county. And so we're co-project managing this. The end products will largely be adopted by the city. Chris Fair was on board. He has departed back to his home state in New York. And so he's being replaced with a capital engineer from the city, Ben Markert. Tiffany Antol was on board for a little while. Her workload not going to allow her to continue. So Michelle McNulty is serving in the interim in that role. We do have a project oversight committee. We're still confirming participation. That oversight committee will, as the project management team, will be checking in with them on occasion to make sure that we're kind of on course with policies. If there's any issues that need to be escalated that we can't resolve with the project management team, we'll get their input. As far as the management and where we're at, a lot of data gathering and plan gathering is really, I think, for all intents and purposes, complete. There might be one or two things that we need to gather. There's a number of groups that I'll overview. You can see them listed here. We're still identifying members for many of those. Those groups, the technical working group, affectionately known as the TWIG, is going to be kind of the technical oversight, making sure the process, the technical analysis, the methodologies are all in keeping with their expectations and needs for member agencies, as well as oversight of kind of the general planning, public participation as well. we implement that. We will have a complete streets task force that's really going to focus on design. They'll come in a little bit later in the process after we've received a bunch of public input in terms of how streets should look and function. And then they'll get into the nitty gritty and make it recommendations. And then there'll be a stakeholder advisory committee made up of respective interests across the region, whether it's the development community, tourism community, things like that. We did have a citizens advisory group, but as we engaged with Kittleson, our consultant, the project management team is feeling like that's starting to get a little bit unwieldy. We are going to have a very robust public participation process and feel that we can kind of funnel this larger public perspective in through these groups. And in this next slide is a very busy graphic. I'm going to do my best to walk you through and show how all this ties together. So like I said, very busy graphic, very colorful. And you can see at the very top, those kind of three big components: the master plan, complete streets guidelines, and policy and standards update. And that far left, you see there's a master plan, which will be adopted by the city. And really what's been a precursor to that master plan for many years is our MetroPlan regional transportation plan. City has never adopted it, although it has been at the core of the transportation tax initiatives in 2000 and 2018. So this will really, by the city adopting their master plan, gives a lot more teeth and policy guidance there. So you see on the far left, kind of this process, it all flows up, but it's not just a one-way flow. There's going to be a lot of iterations and feedback loops throughout the process. So there's groups that advise the plan, inform the plan, build the plan, oversee the plan, and then adopt the plan. So you see the council at the top, they are going to be adopting all three of these major components. The MetroPlan board will adopt our regional transportation plan, but we really don't have that regulatory authority, so we don't need the complete street guidelines. We certainly don't enforce regulatory issues. So that's why we don't extend across all the way for the board. The Transportation Commission and Zoning Commission, this is going to be a formal adoption by the council, and so they need their input as required by charter and state code. So there'll be things will feed up through those bodies, including for our RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, will go through the TAC. Feeding the TAC will be this twig, and our project management team will be working very closely together. And the Complete Streets Task Force will be advising the twig on those cross sections and the implications they have for fire and maintenance and cost. Because of the very broad policies, many policies we have affecting bikes and peds and active transportation, we'll be seeking a lot of input from the city PAC and backpack, I think. And they are, again, just for information, they are subcommittees or advisory to the city's transportation commission. And then there's these other groups. I can say we've got the advisory committee really weighing in, kind of threw me. I think that could probably be one vote. It's like, oh, there's three groups? No, same group. And then as we engage with the other groups at the bottom, one of the things that we're really looking forward to, Kittleson is going to be engaging with a lot of city departments, county divisions, one-on-one to really get their input. So we're looking forward to that. You might see that the county board of supervisors was really only engaged in that MetroPlan regional transportation plan column. Why is that? Well, for one, they're not involved in adopting a city transportation master plan. They are involved in the broader region. and why aren't they involved in the design guidelines and policies and standards? This is when we were scoping this project and engaging with county staff. Said, hey, we've got some other things going on. They've gotten some big grants themselves. So they're doing similar work and didn't really feel like they needed the benefit of this process. Though there are opportunities, for us to inform what they're doing and vice versa. So like I said, busy graphic, but we think it's starting to tell the story. And let me see, I think we're about wrapped up and we can come back to that if we need to. Here's our technical working group. It is a work in progress, although I think this is starting to take shape. It's a work in progress. The city transportation section lost 3 people in rapid succession. And so we're playing catch up in some of these areas. What's coming up? You can see the things you can see these things here. I think what's really going to be important for this board and the council. One of the early products that Kittleson is producing is a community profile and a kind of a gap analysis of policies versus standards, policies versus practice. And at that point, we really ought to be coming back before you, and I think that is in the intent, to really lay those out so that as you get more information over time, that will be the filter or the framework that, it's like, how do we resolve these gaps? And so that should be coming up within this, actually probably more like a 90-day outlook. So yeah, there's a 90-day look ahead. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Or do we have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave, I just want to compliment you on your very colorful page.
That would be Kittleson, but I'll let them know.
I think seeing that today for me was sort of like put pieces in place that we've talked about in a lot of different ways, but today I was able to sort of see like a pathway for how those entities are engaged in the processes for the things that we're involved with and support. So I appreciate that.
Kittleson will be very pleased to hear about the graphic. And I will say they've been great to work with. They have links to many of their other products, that are similar to what we should be expecting. And they're all very impressive. So I think we have a lot to look forward to.
Let's see any other questions. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, we're down to our draft fiscal year 2025 single item. Madam Chair.
I believe we have a few members of the public who would like to give comment on the previous item, the SSMP. So I'll call Christian Mahler, and you're welcome to address. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Okay. Thank you for moving me away from the cookies. Smells so good. So I'm here to make a comment, but now that I saw that beautiful colored chart, I also have a few questions, but if they're not appropriate to answer here, maybe we can figure something else out. So I'm an epidemiologist and I'm always thinking about public health. So I'm happy to hear when you mentioned some of the things that you're working on involve pedestrian and bike walkways, because we have 2 huge public health issues related to transportation. One is, of course, reducing accidents, injuries, and deaths from cars and bikes, cars and people. And then the other is not seen as much, which is getting people to move and go out and about, is influenced a lot, we find more and more, by the environment. So people who say, I'm going to start working out, and they make that resolution on New Year's Eve. And then you look 2 weeks later and everyone's back on their couch, right? But if you make a walkway so that they can walk to work easily, they will do it.
and they will do it if they can bike to work, and it's just as fast and so on. So I'm just asking you to try to keep that in mind for every policy. I know that you're bound by your grants. I know they have a lot of restrictions, but anytime you can push back on that or include things, that's very helpful. The second thing then, that was my comment. And my question is just about community engagement in the planning of the safe streets. And I saw there were several places like Bike Advisory Group and so on. You also mentioned that you had a stakeholder, was it the stakeholder group or the community group that got unwieldy? And so I was just kind of curious what that was and where there will be opportunities for community input. And I can sit back down. I don't have to stand here.
Would you like my question to be answered here? But mine answered. Thank you. You.
Thank you for your question and your interest. You're probably aware, just based from your comments, that lots of policies in support of biking and pedestrian activity. And really what this part of what this master plan is looking to do is map those out in greater detail so that those expectations can be met, as well as setting some regulatory expectations where we can't map, but those details like, a street network and new subdivision will meet our expectations as a community. As far as the community engagement piece, we are waiting for that participation plan from Kittleson. We're still in early days, but similar to the products I've referenced earlier, their outreach efforts, it's part of the reasons we selected them. So there's going to be a broad array of techniques and already coordinating with us on, awareness of different events in the public where we can come side by side with Kittleson to collect that input. I will say this, and I think it's, for the benefit of our board members as well, staff is expressing, still this interest in getting, kind of the John and Jane Doe off the, person on the street perspective, and maybe in a more detailed way than that kind of broad type of participation net can gather. But a standing group seemed, it was just, I'll say part of their concern is just the many scheduling, trying to keep this thing on course when we're, feeding up and then feedback loops. And one more standing group was part of the unwieldy part. So we're still working out the details on that. So follow along. And if we haven't answered that question or answered it adequately and over the next couple of months, please give us a call.
Can I? The bike advisory group and the pedestrian advisory groups,
Yeah.
are those already formed or are there going to be ways?
Those are standing committees that serve the city's transportation commission.
Our next item on the agenda is to share with you the results of our FY25 single audit. And so as our federal funding has increased over the years, one of the requirements is now that we conduct a single audit every year. And so we started the audit process back in, I feel like, September of 2025 and provided all the information requested of the auditors. And we were able to wrap that up with last month in February. Our audit was successful. You can see from the comments here on the slide, we had no findings. Auditor was very confident in our position. There were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We continue to maintain a low risk rating, which is great because when we're seeking funding, that's one of the first things that they'll look Also, there were no findings related to our financial statements, and none of our costs or expenses were questioned. So that's all very good news. A draft was provided to you in package. The next process is that the auditor will be sending our letter to governance, which is all of you, our board. And they will also be filing the report, the audit, as required. Those are our next steps. There were a couple of recommendations that the auditor provided. These were not considered findings. They did not result in any material finding. But they did make some recommendations that we close monitor our expenses so that we are allocating the expense in the correct position. We had 2 instances out of the 45 transactions that they selected to review where the expense occurred in June, but we reported the expense in July. So we will monitor that June here. They also asked us to begin capitalizing and receiving the lease agreement that we have with Mountain Line. So the office space that we have here in this building has a value, and they recognize that that value is being monitored and depreciated every year until it's used up. That's not a technical term, but that's. And the last one was that as we conduct requests for proposals and those solicitations that we do for services, that we ask our evaluation committee members to complete a conflict of interest form. You've all received my email last week about completing a conflict of interest form. So they've asked us to include our evaluators in that process, just to ensure that as we score and make decisions about how we're spending our money, that everyone has let us know that there's not a conflict of interest. And so those were the only recommendations that we received. Pretty good audit. We're proud of that. Are there any questions?
What's the objective of depreciating leases? Is it a no cost lease?
There are, there is a value in the lease. If we were to terminate the lease, we would, and maybe Kate can help me with the explanation about the actual recommendation.
Yeah, so the lease agreement that we have with Mountain Line is $12,000 a year and then an inflation cost annually. And I think we have 5 years, a minimum of 5 years that we get to contribute towards the building. And it's not just the lease, it's that we paid, I believe it's that we paid a capital improvement for the building of $100,000. So they really want us to be tracking that $100,000 capital improvement over 5 years and showing what's remaining in that capital improvement. We do not pay cash for our lease. We have an agreement. Well, Mountain Line could charge us cash if they wanted to, but we use that value as in kind for grants. And so we're able to partner on that to leverage money for the region rather than exchange cash for the lease. So it works out great for MetroPlan because we're getting a lease-free arrangement. It works out great for the region because we're able to bring more money in without expending any cash. So, so that's the arrangement. It's really about that. I think it's the $100,000 capital improvement fee that we paid towards the building and towards our offices in the building.
We have some questions, and as we were speaking today, we receive a certain percentage of that $100,000 back. As time continues, that gets smaller and smaller. So that's what actually.
I'm going to take the next item. I apologize for the mistake in your agenda. I've noted in the agenda that Kate was going to give the report, but I will do that. So I have information for you today about our Q2 financials. So we ended, it's a little bit late, mostly because we had the such one, and so there was not an opportunity to present this report to you at that meeting. So I'm presenting to you now the results for last December. Overall, we would think at the midpoint of the year, most of our expenses should be around 50%. But we're actually, our expenses are only at 29%. And that's due to a few different categories. In salary and benefits, our expenses are 41% of budget. We had vacancies, great vacancies on the bill. The same was on the board, and it was on the bill, so we had some savings in that. The other area that contributes to that low usage of the budget is the special projects. Our special projects are timed at different points through the year. And one of the reasons that the spending in that area is lower than expected at this time is that state streets master plan project hadn't really yet kicked off in terms of billing for services. And so we've received that first invoice from our consultant Wilson. And so you can expect to see that increase in the next quarter. Travel expenses are right at budget, 49% budget, and overall operating expenses are a little bit higher. They're 59% budget. We have a couple of categories, payroll processing and our IT support are a little higher than anticipated. That's due to some changes in staffing. As outlined, who provides our payroll processing and IT support. Not a concern. We're 59% of budget. We have savings in other areas. So overall, questions?
Thank you. Any questions? I'm not seeing the computer. Yes, we have our happenings and Kate.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. There's been a lot going on. We're going to focus on a couple things as you already, as you already saw. There's been a lot of movement on both the state and federal level in terms of legislative activity. I was able to go down to the legislature with Chair Sweet and Member Vasquez to advocate for the Arizona Smart Fund and the RTAC bill and the Senator Rogers bill and go to the RTAC lunch. So we had a great day down there and spoke with many people, and I'm grateful for them both taking the entire day to do that. I also want to recognize Member Aslan, who gave a comment on US 180 at the State Transportation Board. I don't recall if he used the phrase do a 180 on 180, but we'll start tallying that and see which of you say it, which of you don't. Let's see. Oh, I guess that's all I had. Actually, there's a bunch of grant updates also in your report. I just didn't make a slide for them. But there's been a lot of movement on the grant front as well, and a lot of exciting things. So the city has made 2 applications to the Arizona Smart Fund. One is for that J.W. Powell extension, design, and engineering services. Then they would go for that raise or build grant in the next year or 2 to pursue that. They also made an application to match a federal grant that they wrote for what they call the Big Phil Lake project, which is fixing culverts associated with the railroad on the east side of town that contribute to all the flooding of Lake Continental, that area. So if they can get some of that fixed, that could really open up some of that land for development. So an exciting project there. It also sets the stage for that third rail that BNSF is looking to have through town. So those are 2 exciting grants. Mountain Line has been really successful on the grant front in the last couple of weeks. They've received over $6 million to improve every bus stop that needs improvement on their system. So I think that money would do all of the bus stop improvements. So upgrades from signs to shelters or logo stops, whatever the recommended solution is. So very excited to see that one move forward. We noted earlier that the county had put in for $2.5 million for the Belmont, for design of the Belmont interchange to help move that project forward as well. So just lots of things happening on the grant front right now, which is really great. As I mentioned, we have a number of grants that haven't opened that we haven't had the opportunity to apply for, but overall things are still looking good. I have one bad news item on the grant front. Don't worry, we're going to let it go because we've been so successful. We did we did have our first grant award rescinded. And it was a award for approximately $180,000, which was a partnership with NAU to advance their crank tool, which is a bike comfort index research project that they were doing. This grant was awarded at the end of the Biden administration. We were never able to execute a grant agreement. We email them every couple months. What about our grant? What about our grant? They did finally email back and say, you're not getting that. There was no more formal process than that. But like I said, we've been so successful with the grants. This one was just $180,000. And so, we won't make a big stink about it. That is my happenings report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Kate. So we are down to closing business, and I will take any items from the board. Anyone online? I actually have something if no one else has anything to bring forward. It is time for us to start talking about Kate's review. And Kate and I are meeting and discussing, whether we want to change how we did it last year. Did it work? Did it not? I would take any feedback. Kate also did email me some other possible suggestions. I did tell Kate earlier before the meeting that I've been pretty busy the last couple of days. I haven't been able to read through that, but happy to do that and have more discussions. But I wanted to see from the board how we felt, and if there's anything off the top that you can think of, and if you don't want to say it here, you can always email me with any thoughts on this. And we do want this by April.
Yeah, so the timeline for my review, my contract says it needs to be done at our May meeting. So really the timeline is if we want to do any kind of 360 survey as we have in the last couple of years, or meet with staff to get feedback from them or TAC members, we really need to kick that off so that way we can actually have the review in May.
Are there anything that we want to say today, or do you feel comfortable if something comes to mind to email me?
I'm okay with the latter.
Great, thank you. Not seeing anyone online with any thoughts on this, so Kate and I will just keep moving forward and bring you a birthday home. It'll be good. Okay, the next scheduled board meeting is April 2nd, 2026. And if at all possible, if you can come in person, it sure does help facilitate a better conversation. Oh, and there's cookies and coffee and water and tea and smiles. With that, I'm not seeing anything else, so I am going to adjourn our meeting. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.